The echo of the store manager's sharp voice cut through the marble-floored boutique on Madison Avenue. Every customer turned their head to witness the confrontation. In the middle of that luxury convenience store stood a barefoot boy named Malik Carter, only 10 years old, clutching 20 cents tightly in his small fist. His clothes were torn, his face pale, but his eyes burning with determination did not flinch. "Please," Malik whispered, though his voice carried the weight of steel, "my baby sister hasn't stopped crying. She's hungry. I just need some powdered milk." The manager, a middle-aged woman, sneered. 20 cents won't even buy you a breath of air here. This place is for real customers, not beggars." Her words dripped with disdain. At that exact moment, the glass doors opened, and in walked Victor Harrington, a billionaire property tycoon in a $3,000 suit, fresh from closing a $50 million deal. Malik's eyes immediately locked onto him, hope flickering like a candle in the storm. "Sir, please," he pleaded. "One day, I'll pay you back. My grandmother used to tell me, there's always someone with a good heart. Could you be that person today?" Victor stopped in his tracks, irritated at being addressed by a child from the streets. His cold, blue eyes swept Malik up and down. "Do you even know who I am?" he snapped. "I build towers in this city. I don't waste time on beggars." "I'm not a beggar," Malik answered firmly, though tears glistened in his eyes. "My father died serving this country. My mother works 3 jobs. And today she collapsed. I just want my soul sister to stop crying." Victor laughed cruelly, pulling a crisp $100 bill from his wallet. "Here's a deal. Get on your knees, right here, in front of everyone. Apologize for bothering me, and maybe, just maybe, I'll let your hardworking family have this." The store fell silent. Phones came out, customers held their breath. Malik stared at the bill, then raised his chin. His voice, steady and unshaken, broke the silence. "My father didn't give his life so I could kneel to small men with big wallets." Victor's smile vanished. The crowd murmured. And in that moment, Malik Carter planted a seed, a promise that one day, he would return. And when he did, the man who mocked him would learn that underestimating a child with dignity could be the most expensive mistake of all. The store had fallen into silence after the tense confrontation, but not everyone left carrying only shock or pity. Among the onlookers was Eleanor Grant, a seasoned investigative journalist for the New York Herald. At 53, Eleanor had spent 3 decades peeling back the glossy layers of Manhattan's elite, exposing corruption, exploitation, and greed, hidden behind skyscraper windows. She had walked into that convenience store that morning for nothing more than a cup of coffee. What she walked out with was a story that would redefine the rest of her career and, unknowingly, change the destiny of the barefoot boy named Malik Carter. When the manager barked at Malik to leave, and when Victor Harrington, one of the wealthiest men in New York, mocked the child's plea, Eleanor had instinctively reached for her phone. Her reporter's intuition told her this moment carried weight. She recorded every second. The humiliation, the cruel laughter, the boy's refusal to kneel, and finally his unforgettable words. "My father didn't give his life so I could kneel to small men with big wallets." After security finally forced Malik out, Eleanor slipped through the dispersing crowd and followed him outside. She found him wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, his small shoulders squared, as though he knew showing weakness on the street was dangerous. "Kid," she said softly, lowering her voice so it wouldn't sound like pity, "what's your name?" "Malik," he answered after a pause. His voice carried both defiance and exhaustion, a mixture she had heard in war survivors, but rarely in children. "Malik Carter." Eleanor studied him for a moment. 10 years old, thin frame, torn shirt, but eyes sharper than most adults she'd ever interviewed. She reached into her purse, pulled out $50, and handed it to him. "That should get your sister milk and diapers for at least a week. But I need you to promise me something." Suspicion flickered across his face. "What's that?" "Never forget that man's name. Never forget this day. And never let anyone convince you that you are worth less than he is." Malik hesitated, then nodded. "I promise." That night, as Eleanor typed her notes into her laptop, the scene replayed in her head like a film. She couldn't shake the way Victor Harrington had smiled while degrading a child, nor could she ignore the boy's unbreakable dignity. She called her editor immediately. "I need a full background check on Harrington," she said. "Something tells me humiliating children isn't the worst of his sins. What began as curiosity quickly evolved into a full-blown investigation. Within weeks, Eleanor unearthed a trail of misconduct stretching back decades. 3 harassment lawsuits, settled quietly out of court. Dozens of families evicted from properties Harrington had snatched below market value. A suspicious set of political donations that had derailed construction of a much-needed public school in the Bronx. A school that would have given children like Malik a fighting chance. Each document, each testimony painted the same portrait. A man who thrived not in spite of cruelty, but because of it. Meanwhile, Eleanor kept in touch with the Carter family. She visited their cramped one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx, and saw with her own eyes what wealth could never purchase: love, resilience, and unity. Malik's mother, Danielle Carter, worked exhausting double shifts at a hospital while also taking part-time jobs to keep food on the table. Baby Naomi, only 6 months old, clung to life with the fragile neediness of infancy. And Malik, despite his age, had become her guardian whenever their mother was gone, rocking her to sleep, warming bottles, soothing cries. But there was something else Eleanor noticed. Books. Piles of books, many borrowed from the local library, stacked in corners and spread across the kitchen table. Malik devoured them with an intensity that stunned her. When she asked him what he was reading, he spoke. Not like a 10-year-old, but like a scholar in the making. He wanted to know why powerful men could harm so many and never be punished. He wanted to understand loopholes, court cases, history. One evening, she found him scribbling in a notebook worn from constant use. "What are you writing?" she asked. Malik hesitated before answering. "I'm studying men like Harrington. How they rise, how they fall, what mistakes they make. I want to understand them." Eleanor leaned closer, her experienced eyes narrowing with intrigue. "Do you know the difference between revenge and justice?" she asked. "Not really," Malik admitted. "Revenge is impulsive," she explained. "It burns hot and fast, and it usually destroys the one who seeks it. Justice is different. Justice is patient, intelligent. It doesn't just punish one man, it changes the system that allowed him to thrive." The boy listened carefully, then nodded. "Then I want justice." From that night on, Eleanor became more than a reporter to Malik. She became a mentor, a guide, sometimes even a surrogate grandmother. She brought him advanced textbooks, connected him to tutoring programs for gifted children, and quietly laid the foundation for his education. When she spoke to his teachers, she learned his IQ ranked in the top 5% nationwide. "Your father always said you had something special in your head," Danielle told him, pride shining through her fatigue. Yet for all the encouragement, Eleanor knew this wasn't just about nurturing a gifted child. This was about planting the seeds of a movement. Her investigation into Harrington continued relentlessly. She built files, documented testimonies, tracked his network of influence. Every cruel word he uttered at lavish dinners, every arrogant laugh about putting a poor kid in his place, was catalogued through discreet sources. She wasn't simply recording a man's corruption. She was preparing evidence for the day when Malik would be ready to confront him on his own terms. What struck her most, however, was Malik's discipline. He wasn't consumed by hatred. Instead, he transformed humiliation into a blueprint for change. While other boys played basketball in cracked playgrounds, Malik sat under street lamps, reading case studies of fallen tycoons. He annotated every article, underlined every lesson. "They all make the same mistake," he told Eleanor one night. "They think they're untouchable. But their egos, their money, and their reputation, those are their weak spots. Take one down, and the others fall." Eleanor smiled. She had seen politicians crumble under scandals, CEOs tumble from grace. But never had she seen a 10-year-old articulate the mechanics of power with such clarity. In her heart, she knew this boy was destined for something extraordinary. For Victor Harrington, humiliating Malik Carter had been nothing more than an amusing distraction. For Eleanor Grant and Malik, however, that day had been the spark of a journey. One would spend years documenting the rot at the heart of wealth and privilege. The other would grow, learn, and sharpen his mind like a blade. Together, though neither fully realized it yet, they had begun writing the opening chapter of a story that would, 15 years later, shake Wall Street to its core. The night air in the Bronx was heavy with the sound of sirens in the distance, the hum of traffic, and the faint rhythm of music drifting from an open apartment window. Inside a cramped one-bedroom unit on the 4th floor of a crumbling brick building, Malik Carter sat at the kitchen table, under the dim glow of a flickering lamp. Around him were scattered notebooks, library books borrowed on temporary cards, and sheets of paper filled with his untidy handwriting. His baby sister Naomi slept in a makeshift crib in the corner, and his exhausted mother, Danielle, had just returned from another double shift at the hospital. Most 10-year-olds might have been asleep by now, dreaming of comic book heroes or playground adventures. But Malik's eyes remained sharp, his pencil moving swiftly across the page. On the cover of his notebook, in uneven block letters, he had written 2 words that would quietly shape the next chapter of his life. Project Justice. It had been only weeks since his humiliating encounter with Victor Harrington inside the Drycy upscale convenience store. The sting of that moment still burned in his memory, the laughter, the disdain, the cruel bargain of a $100 bill dangled like bait. But what burned even brighter was his own defiance, his refusal to kneel. Malik knew instinctively that what happened wasn't just about him. It was about every child like him who was told they were worth less than a price tag, every mother who worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford rent, every family whose dignity was dismissed by those in glass towers. At first, Project Justice was nothing more than a child's determination scribbled in a notebook. Malik filled its pages with questions. Why do powerful men escape consequences? What laws protect them? How do they keep people silent? How do they fall? He devoured books about history's great scandals, reading about moguls who seemed untouchable until a single mistake brought them down. He studied cases of whistleblowers, investigative journalists, and prosecutors who exposed corruption. He wasn't looking for revenge. He was looking for system patterns, weaknesses, strategies. One evening, as Eleanor Grant, the journalist who had become his mentor, visited the Carter apartment, she noticed the notebook lying open. "What's this?" she asked, curiosity piqued. Malik hesitated. He had grown used to hiding it beneath his mattress, fearing someone might dismiss it as childish fantasy. But something in Eleanor's gaze, sharp yet kind, probing yet patient, convinced him to share. "It's my plan," he said quietly. "Not to get back at Harrington, but to understand men like him. To figure out how they work, and how to stop them." Eleanor's lips curved into a slow smile. In her 30 years as a journalist, she had met politicians, activists, even young idealists, fresh out of college. But she had never encountered a child with such strategic clarity. She pulled out a chair and sat beside him. "Malik," she said, "let me tell you something important. There's a difference between revenge and justice. Do you know what it is?" He shook his head. "Revenge is emotional. It's raw. It's about hurting someone back as quickly as possible. But justice is patient. It thinks. It builds. It doesn't just punish one man. It changes the system that allowed him to thrive." Her words sank into him like seeds planted deep in fertile soil. He nodded slowly, then picked right up his pencil again. At the top of a fresh page, he wrote, "Justice is smarter than revenge." From then on, Project Justice became more focused. Malik began to categorize what Eleanor called the 3 vulnerabilities of powerful men: ego, money, and reputation. He created columns in his notebook. Under ego, he listed examples of arrogance leading to downfall. Under money, he noted how financial records always left a trail. Under reputation, he wrote about scandals that spread like wildfire once public opinion turned. But Malik didn't stop there. He started mapping out strategies like a chess player planning 15 moves ahead. If a man relies on ego, confront him with truth that shatters it. If he hides behind money, follow the paper trail. If he clings to reputation, shine a light on his cruelty until the world sees. These were no longer the musings of a wounded boy. They were the Crossix building blocks of a future prosecutor, though neither he nor Eleanor could yet see the full scope. Danielle sometimes worried about her son's intensity. "You're only 10, Malik," she whispered one night as she folded laundry, glancing at his furrowed brow. "Don't carry the rage-gr grouse weight of the world already." But Malik only smiled faintly. "I'm not carrying it, Mom. I'm studying it. One day, I'll use it to help people like us." Over the years, Eleanor nurtured his determination. She brought him books on law, history, and economics. She arranged tutoring sessions, scholarships, opportunities that pulled him further from the cycle of poverty. But more than that, she gave him perspective. Whenever he grew angry at Harrington's cruelty, she reminded him, "Anger is a spark. Use it to light a gay.cam lamp, not burn yourself. And so Malik's anger transformed into discipline. His humiliation became motivation. His pain sharpened into purpose. What Victor Harrington thought was a moment of amusement in a luxury store had unknowingly planted a seed. That seed grew in the pages of a notebook labeled Project Justice, watered by late nights under dim light, nourished by Eleanor's wisdom, and strengthened by Danielle's unwavering love. No one, least of all Harrington himself, could have imagined that a 10-year-old boy's vow would one day expand into a movement powerful enough to challenge Wall Street. But in that Bronx apartment, surrounded by second-hand books and the steady breathing of a sleeping infant, Malik Carter was already building the blueprint. Not for revenge, not for temporary satisfaction, for justice. And in the quiet, he wrote down the words that would guide him for the next 15 years. The best revenge is not making someone pay for the past. The best revenge is building a future where they become irrelevant. 15 years had passed since the morning Malik Carter walked out of a Madison Avenue convenience store with nothing but 20 cents. A promise. And a fire burning inside him. That day had been the birth of something greater than anger. It had been the seed of a mission. And in the years that followed, Malik nurtured that mission with relentless discipline until it became the very core of his identity. By the time he was in high school, Malik had already developed a reputation as the boy who could outthink anyone. Teachers marveled at his sharp mind, his ability to dissect complex legal cases with the precision of someone twice his age. When other students were playing basketball or video games, Malik spent his afternoons in the public library, surrounded by towers of books on constitutional law, economics, and the biographies of famous prosecutors. In the evenings, he poured his thoughts into the same notebook he had started at 10 years old, now worn and filled with years of notes. Across its pages, the phrase Project Justice appeared, like a mantra, reminding him of his purpose. His grades earned him a full scholarship to Harvard, but it wasn't just academics that defined his years there. It was strategy. Malik understood that knowledge alone was not enough to confront a man like Victor Harrington. Power was not toppled by brilliance alone. It required networks, alliances, and influence. At Harvard, Malik specialized in financial crimes and corporate law, knowing that this was where Harrington and men like him hid their sins. Offshore accounts, shell corporations, political donations. All the tools of manipulation became Malik's field of study. While his classmates chased internships at prestigious firms, Malik pursued something more precise. Connections. He joined student journalism circles, built friendships with aspiring politicians, debated with future prosecutors, and quietly aligned himself with those who, like him, despised the corruption of America's elite. He did not reveal his full story to everyone, but to a select few he confided, "One day, I'm going to bring down a man who believes he's untouchable. And when I do, it won't just be for me, it'll be for every family crushed under his greed." Those who heard him never forgot the conviction in his voice. Meanwhile, Eleanor Grant, now in her 60s, remained his constant mentor. She connected him with seasoned journalists who taught him the art of documentation and evidence gathering. Together, they built a discreet archive, a vault of reports, testimonies, and financial records that revealed Harrington's empire for what it truly was: a machine of exploitation. Eleanor's investigative network became Malik's silent army, but Malik knew journalism alone couldn't bring justice. He expanded his reach, befriending congressional aides, law clerks, and even young federal investigators. His charm lay not in arrogance but in authenticity. He never pretended to be something he wasn't. He told them about his upbringing in the Bronx, about watching his mother work herself to exhaustion, about the hunger in his sister's cries. People trusted him because he was genuine. And in turn, they opened doors. By his final year at Harvard, Malik had already published academic papers dissecting loopholes in financial law. Professors predicted a brilliant career in academia or private practice. But Malik's vision stretched further. He wasn't chasing prestige, he was laying the foundation for something larger. Late at night, he often revisited the same question: what does it take to topple an empire? His answer grew sharper with time: patience, precision, and people. Patience to wait for the right moment. Precision to gather undeniable proof. And people to form a coalition stronger than one man's wealth. In those years, Malik also learned resilience. He faced pressure from classmates who mocked his obsession, from professors who doubted his unconventional goals, from wealthy peers who could not imagine why anyone would target a titan like Victor Harrington. But Malik carried inside him a quiet fire. Each doubt only strengthened his resolve. Back in New York, Harrington continued to live as though nothing could touch him. He bought properties across the city, forced hundreds of families out of their homes, and expanded his empire with unchecked arrogance. At lavish dinners, he often repeated the story of the arrogant boy who once dared to ask him for milk. His guests would laugh, clinking champagne glasses, never realizing that every retelling was being recorded by sources loyal to Eleanor and, by extension, Malik. By the time Malik graduated from Harvard with honors, he had already mapped out a 10-year strategy. He joined the Justice Department as a young federal prosecutor, specializing in financial crimes. Every case he took, every corrupt official he helped expose, was another rehearsal, another sharpening of his blade. His colleagues admired his relentless pursuit of truth. Some even whispered that he had a personal vendetta, though none could guess its origin. But Malik was careful. He never rushed. He never allowed emotion to dictate his moves. He remembered Eleanor's words. Revenge burns fast. Justice is patient. So he waited, studied, gathered evidence, and built a network of allies in government, law enforcement, and the press. Piece by piece, the scaffolding of Harrington's downfall was being constructed. His mother, Danielle, watched with quiet pride. She had once feared her son was burdening himself with too much responsibility too young. Now, she saw that responsibility transformed into destiny. His sister Naomi, once a hungry infant, grew into a bright teenager inspired by her brother's determination. The Carter household, though still modest, was filled with hope, rather than despair. Malik often returned home to remind himself of why he fought. Sitting at the same kitchen table where Project Justice had been born, he would review files late into the night, the voices of his childhood echoing in his mind. You're worthless. Beggars don't belong here, everyone has a price. And then he would see the faces of the families Harrington had destroyed, the family, schools left unbuilt, the neighborhoods stripped bare. That was all the fuel he needed. 15 years after that day in the convenience store, Malik Carter was no longer the barefoot boy with 20 cents. He was a respected federal prosecutor, a man with allies in every corner of the justice system, and a vault of evidence thicker than any billionaire's wall of money. And though Victor Harrington continued to toast to his own invincibility, Malik knew the gritted truth. The empire Harrington had built on arrogance and exploitation was already cracking. All it would take was one push. The boy who once stood humiliated on marble floors was now ready. The promise whispered, at 10 years old, was no longer a dream. It was a countdown. The skyline of Manhattan shimmered under the afternoon sun, but inside the 50-story glass tower bearing the name Harrington and Company, the air was heavy with unease. Rumors had swirled for weeks across Wall Street. Federal investigators probing questionable deals, whispers of sealed indictments, frantic board meetings behind closed doors. Yet Victor Harrington, now 60 years old with silver hair, and the same icy arrogance he had carried for decades, brushed them off as distractions. He was convinced, as always, that he was untouchable. That illusion shattered the moment his secretary appeared at the office door, pale and trembling. Mr. Harrington, the FBI is here. They have warrants. Before Victor could reply, 3 agents entered, their badges glinting under the fluorescent lights. And behind them came a figure that froze him where he stood. A tall, impeccably dressed man in a navy blue suit, leather briefcase in hand, with eyes Victor had seen once before, eyes filled with unshakable resolve. Mr. Harrington, the young man said calmly, extending his hand. Malik Carter, Federal Prosecutor, Financial Crimes Division. I believe we've met. Victor's mouth went dry. For a moment, his mind scrambled to reconcile the impossibility. This couldn't be the same barefoot boy he had mocked 15 years earlier, the child with 20 cents who had dared to stand tall against him. Yet the sharp gaze, the unyielding posture, it was unmistakable. You're that kid, Victor stammered, his voice breaking. The one who promised to pay you back when I grew up? Malik finished for him, his tone steady. Yes, and today is the day you discover that underestimating a child's dignity can be the most expensive mistake of your life. The agents began seizing files, hard drives, and financial records. Malik set his briefcase on the polished desk and carefully opened it, revealing a meticulously organized stack of documents. He placed a tablet on top, tapped the screen, and suddenly the office filled with Victor's own recorded voice. "These kids from the suburbs need to learn where they belong," the recording sneered. "I once offered a brat $100 to Neil, and he refused." Pathetic, but amusing. Victor felt his stomach twist. He had told that story dozens of times at dinners, toasting with champagne, relishing in his cruelty. He never imagined every arrogant word was being documented by Eleanor Grant's network. Now, the evidence played back to him like a confession. Malik leaned forward, his eyes locked on Victor's. "For the past 15 years, I've studied your every move. Your offshore accounts. The bribes you paid to council members. The families you forced out of their homes. Your empire was built on greed and intimidation, and today it collapses." Victor tried to rally, his old bravado returning. "You think you can destroy me with paperwork? I have lawyers who will tear you apart. I have senators on my payroll, judges in my pocket." "Not anymore," Malik interrupted, sliding a document across the desk. "Senator Morrison was arrested yesterday for accepting your bribes. Judge Hartwell, who dismissed cases against you, is under federal investigation. And Mayor Davidson, the one who greenlit your illegal evictions, resigned this morning." The color drained from Victor's face. He stumbled back into his leather chair, gripping the armrests as though they could anchor him to the power slipping away. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No," Malik said quietly. "This is justice. And justice, Mr. Harrington, is patient." Outside, news crews had already gathered, tipped off by Eleanor herself. Cameras waited like watchful eyes as agents hauled boxes of evidence through the lobby. Reporters shouted questions, their microphones trembling with anticipation. Victor tried one last time to assert control. "My reputation, my business, my family," he shouted, almost pleading. "Your reputation?" Malik repeated. "It will show the world that behind the philanthropist facade was a predator." "Your business?" "It thrived on the suffering of thousands." "Your family?" "They'll learn the truth, that their fortune was built on broken lives." The silence that followed was suffocating. Victor Harrington, once the king of New York real estate, sat powerless before the boy he had mocked, now a man wielding truth like a weapon. As the agents fastened handcuffs around his wrists, Victor muttered bitterly, "All this, for 20 cents worth of milk?" Malik shook his head. "No, Mr. Harrington. All this for 15 years of dignity you tried to steal in a single moment. You invested your life in arrogance, corruption, and contempt. I invested mine in education, resilience, and justice. This is the return on investment." The elevator ride down to the lobby was silent except for the clicking of cameras waiting below. When the doors opened, a blinding storm of flashes erupted. Reporters shouted Victor's name, but it was Malik who stepped forward, facing the microphones. His voice rang clear. "Justice has no age, no color, no social class. It has only patience. 15 years ago, I promised a man that dignity was priceless. Today, that promise has been fulfilled." The crowd roared. Social media feeds exploded. Within minutes, headlines lit up. Billionaire. Victor Harrington arrested in federal investigation brought down by former child he once humiliated. Inside the federal vehicle, Victor slumped against the seat, his empire crumbling outside the tinted glass. He realized too late that the boy he had mocked as worthless had become the very man capable of dismantling him. And Malik? As he watched Harrington led away, he remembered the promise he had made as a child clutching 20 cents in his hand. "One day, I'll pay you back." That day had arrived. And the cost to Victor Harrington was nothing less than everything he had ever built. The clang of the prison gates echoed like a final verdict as Victor Harrington shuffled into the penitentiary wearing an orange jumpsuit. For decades, he had walked marble floors and penthouse suites, commanding the attention of politicians, bankers, and billionaires with the snap of his fingers. Now, stripped of his tailored suits and Rolex watches, he was nothing more than a number stitched on his uniform. The empire he had spent a lifetime building had collapsed in a single thunderous blow. His mansions had been seized, his bank accounts frozen, his company dissolved in bankruptcy courts. The wife who once attended galas on his arm filed for divorce within months of his arrest, taking what little remained outside federal confiscation. His children, once heirs to unimaginable wealth, changed their last name and refused to visit, ashamed to be associated with the man exposed as a predator of the vulnerable. The lavish lifestyle, the respect, the Influence all evaporated as though they had never existed. In his narrow cell, Victor stared at peeling paint and concrete walls, haunted by the irony of his downfall. For years he had mocked the poor, insisting that dignity could be bought, that everyone had a price. But the boy he had humiliated in a luxury store had proven him wrong. That boy had grown into Malik Carter, a federal prosecutor who dismantled his empire piece by piece. The memory gnawed at Victor, the determined eyes of a child clutching 20 cents, declaring that wealth did not define worth. Now those words echoed louder than the guard's keys outside his door. Victor's arrogance had blinded him. He believed he was invincible, that laws bent for men of Igans. His stature. Instead, his name became a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. The billionaire brought down by his own cruelty. His once loyal associates deserted him, scrambling to protect their reputations. On Wall Street, the Harrington brand, once synonymous with power, was now synonymous with disgrace. While Victor wasted away in prison, Malik thrived. What had begun as humiliation and hunger became the fire that forged him into a champion of justice. He didn't merely stop at Harrington's empire. He turned his skills, his network, and his relentless drive toward helping thousands of families who had suffered under similar predators. His investigations recovered stolen funds, exposed corrupt officials, and secured housing rights for vulnerable Dashan communities. To the public, Malik Carter became more than a prosecutor. He became a symbol. His story spread like wildfire, a barefoot boy once scorned in a store now standing as a national figure of integrity and resilience. Newspapers called him the people's lawyer. Universities invited him to speak to young students about perseverance, ethics, and justice. Families who once had no voice found an advocate in him. Eleanor Grant, the journalist who had first believed in him, watched with quiet pride as Malik transformed into the very embodiment of justice she had always championed. "You turned pain into power," she once told him. Malik's answer was simple. Pain is wasted if it doesn't become purpose. Meanwhile, Victor's reality shrank to the cold routines of prison life. His wealth had bought him silence for years. But here, no one cared about his past. To the guards, he was just another inmate. To fellow prisoners, he was a fallen king with nothing left to bargain. The arrogance that once defined him had no place within concrete walls. In the end, his wealth had not saved him, and his pride had become the rope that strangled his legacy. The contrast between the two men was stark. One sat in a cell, broken and forgotten, paying the ultimate price for decades of arrogance. The other stood in courtrooms and press conferences, turning injustice into reform and despair into hope. Malik Carter had become what Victor Harrington could never buy, a true hero in the eyes of the people. In the end, the story was not about 20 cents or powdered milk. It was about the priceless value of dignity. Victor lost everything because he believed he could strip a child of his. Malik gained everything because he refused to let anyone take his away. And so, history remembered Victor Harrington not as a titan of real estate, but as a cautionary tale of greed and arrogance. Malik Carter, on the other hand, became the living proof that justice, though slow, never forgets its promises. Years after the fall of Victor Harrington, the skyline of New York bore a new name in gold letters. The Malik Carter Social Justice Center. Once the seat of corruption and greed, the towering building now served as a sanctuary for the vulnerable, providing free legal aid, housing advocacy, and educational programs for thousands of families. In courtrooms, Malik fought tirelessly for those who had been silenced. On the streets, children whispered his name as a symbol of hope. He was no longer the boy with 20 cents, he had become the voice of a movement. But Malik's story did not end there. With millions rallying behind him, he prepared to take the fight to an even higher stage, announcing his candidacy for the United States Senate. His campaign was funded not by billionaires, but by ordinary workers, single mothers, and young dreamers who saw in him proof that justice was not a fantasy, but a promise. His message was simple yet transformative. True revenge is not in destroying your enemy. It is in building a future so just, so bright, that those who once mocked you become irrelevant. We all face moments of humiliation, injustice, or doubt. But like Malik, we can choose to turn pain into purpose, and wounds into wisdom. Dignity, once protected, can grow into a legacy that changes countless lives. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. What promise would you make to yourself today? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories that remind us justice though patient, never forgets.